I buy my sodas when I go grocery shopping, and I just buy them in bulk. I buy typically, so like my stupid grocery store has this thing where they're like, "Hey, it's like one of these for $10, or if you get three, it's like $5 per." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, so one for 10 or three for 15? I'll take three." Yes. And so I just get three at a time every time.
I have not bought. I really only buy soda just about annually to keep around the house, and that is a Sprite cranberry around Christmas time.
There you go.
Because otherwise, I mean, they only sell them in 12 packs. One of the very first things my dentist said to me whenever I finally started going to the dentist again after college was, "Hey, you drink a lot of sugary drinks, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah."
I'm not a big soda person normally, but Canada Dry has kind of become that thing I keep around. So I only have to buy 3 12-packs about every other month, maybe less.
I mean, it's good for the tummy.
Yeah.
So that's a perk, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
So there you go. Make sure you have Canada Dry on hand. Also, this episode of Sunday Plus is brought to you by Canada. I'm just kidding.
Wow, we have upgraded.
It is not brought to you by anything other than our ridiculousness. So on that note, welcome to Sunday Plus.
I am interested, not to just keep us on this Canada Dry. So this is not just a dedicated coffee mug.
It's the one I had with me with my coffee in it earlier today, and I put Canada Dry in there because I like to have something to sip on.
Yeah.
Not so much that it's like just kind of a prop or whatever, but
it is a little bit that. But
a little bit. But I honestly treat a lot of things like this, like moving it around and
Yeah, I feel like from like the podcasts I've listened to, they always get yelled at if they.
There are some guys that have used it historically. So when I first started the first podcast that I did, I went and did all this research, watching the guys who've been like doing it forever and they're really good at it. However you feel about their content, but looking at guys like Howard Stern, Colin Cowherd, Joe Rogan, even like I'm like checking out how do they do their things. And,
right. I mean, check
like
out the technicals.
Howard Stern being arguably the OG.
Sure.
He's got
back when podcasting was called radio.
Yeah, he's got like a $10,000 Neumann microphone that he's rocking, and like probably multiple racks of audio processing gear because why not? I'm Howard Stern. Let's do it. Where these are fantastic podcasting mics that cost a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that.
Yeah. I'll take fractions. I'm gonna look at you and talk.
They look really good, and I think they sound great. So yeah. I like the idea of having something to just occasionally put your hands on.
Yeah,
for sure. You're sitting here just awkward.
That makes me think of. Did you ever watch 30 Rock when it was on?
A little bit.
There's this bit, and I never really watched it, but it came on either right before or right after The Office, and so I would only catch like snips. And one of my favorite bits is Alec Baldwin's character is having to do some sort of like commercial or spot or something. He's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. What should I? And he grabs a mug and he's like, no, I don't know. And then he grabs another mug. So he's got a mug in each hand. He's like, no, yeah, this feels right. This is good. And I'm like, no, what are you doing? And so I've tried to repeat that bit several times. And like, sadly, I think my delivery is often so dry. I'll say something outlandish or do something outlandish and stupid. And maybe in a way it's a compliment that people are just like, hey, we can't do that, or that's not okay. I'm like, okay, cool. You just think I'm a little dense.
It's genius though. It's so fun. I had a buddy of mine who was lives in Austin. He was at South by Southwest, and he got invited to go hang out with like some of these guys that are considered comedy legends.
Yeah.
He was hanging out with, oh my gosh, what are their names? One of them is plays Jean Ralphio on Parks and Rec.
Oh yeah, Ben Schwartz.
Ben Schwartz. You got to hang out with him. You got to hang out with Jake and Amir.
Oh wow.
He got to hang out with Thomas Middleditch, who was there.
I was wondering if Schwartz was involved.
So he was hanging out with this crew, and he's one of the funniest people I know as well. But I asked him, what's it like hanging out with these like comedy geniuses? And he said they're so far ahead of you and they're so fast
Yes.
with their comedy that by the time you realize what they just said and how funny it was, they're 2 jokes ahead.
Yeah.
And he was like, it was insane to be in a room with guys that have dedicated essentially their life
Yeah.
to being the funniest person in the room. And they were already the funniest person in the room before they did. Like, it just, they have the talent, they have the longevity, they have the skill set. Like, it's just everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I could handle that.
I know. Yeah. I would feel so much pressure, I feel like, to try and catch up. And that's one reason I love watching them with each other, right? Like seeing comedians.
Yeah, they can keep up with each
doing
other.
sketches together or whatever, and seeing them like crack each other up is always so fun, because it's always the simplest jokes too, right? Like it's not complicated. It's not even like inappropriate. It's just silliness is always what like gets them. I love it.
That's like a Will Ferrell thing where part of his goal in takes, especially in movies where he's just like plays a really small role, his whole thing is, can I make my coworkers, my co-actors mess up by making them laugh?
Yeah.
Can I get them to break? And he'll just go off script until he gets them to do it. And often those are the takes that they use in the movies because he's just so bananas. And you're just like, how does he do this stuff?
Yeah.
It's genius.
I just watched a reel of bloopers or gags, I guess, from Step Brothers for as crass as that movie is. Every time they get each other to like break is again, just like dumb little stuff, like even just saying like, what'd you say? And like making them like pretending not to have heard something. It's great. I love it.
So getting on topic for a second, you had mentioned to me a few weeks ago that you were meeting up with some of the other youth pastors in the area, and that it became like this known thing to you that like, oh, I guess the Sunday after Easter is unofficially, but kind of officially, I guess it's the youth pastor's turn.
Right, yeah. Youth pastor or associate pastor, if a church has that position. Yeah, handful. There, the taxonomy, the ladder of guest preaching that's not necessarily guest preaching.
Hierarchical. All right,
preaching.
it's this person's turn.
Right, yeah. I tried to say taxonomy instead of hierarchy, but that element's there.
Taxonomy is that one's a deep cut for a lot of people.
That's fair, right?
I haven't heard that word in a minute.
It feels less lordy, right? Ooh. Like less lording. The hierarchy is like qualitative, I guess, but.
So
could also just be using the word taxonomy.
Is that something you feel like you're gonna look forward to every year, or is this gonna be like, oh, I guess I have to do this thing?
Yeah, it depends if I decide to schedule a bunch of stuff for youth ministry the same day as well next year. Because yesterday it was a little heavy. I had a ton of plates spinning. But yeah, I'm always down. I'm happy to step in, especially as David's making his transition and get some guest preachers coming in soon. And if I need to, I don't know, be a relief hitter, pitcher, great.
Man, you're just breaking out all the the equivalents here. I like that. So I'll be your relief pitcher for a week. That's good. But I'm glad you enjoy it, and that is a helpful quality. That this isn't I got to do this again.
Oh yeah, no, it was not always the case. At the previous church I worked at, grad Sunday was really kind of the one Sunday that the pulpit was like open to the youth minister. And I think for that, it felt like so much higher pressure and I don't know, like several elements that like now, I don't know, I have not experienced that. And
Are we officially going to switch from graduation to grad? It's just like, that's it now? Hey, it's grad
I think
Sunday.
we're trying to switch to senior Sunday. So we have been saying graduate Sunday because that's been the old language. However, senior Sunday, it's tight. It's alliterative.
I don't know. Grad kind of rolls off the tongue.
Grad Sunday. That's fair.
Welcome to Grad Sunday.
Grad Sunday, Senior Sunday. What's Pomp and Circumstance Sunday? Turn the tassel. Exactly. I mean, let's get Brock to get the brass section back for this Sunday.
And gosh, the last church I worked at, our worship center was so big that one of the nearby schools all did their graduation ceremonies in our worship center.
Yeah.
And they did like 3 or 4 a year.
Whoa.
because it was fast. It was like it was a tech school.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you have a lot of people that are getting into they're going to work on cars. They're going to be like your standard computer tech guy, whatever. And so they had the worst sounding cut of that song "Pomp and Circumstance," and there was only one cut of it, and it would like always like you would hear this little glitch where it would start itself over.
Yeah.
And my tech team and I, we all got a kick out of that.
Oh yeah.
We were all like, "Oh, this is way too funny.
Yeah.
We're just gonna let this go."
Man, so good. Yeah. When you can see the seams, see the cracks, just let it go.
It's great. So speaking of things like that, you referred to Jesus as Jesus the Prankster.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Big fan.
thought that was one of the most interesting perspectives and perceptions of how, because this guy has there are even worship songs that say you have 1,000 names and it just like how many different things we call him and the different I could start rattling off, but Jesus the Prankster.
Yeah.
Dive into that a little bit. Let me hear that take.
Well, one thing, and I sort of I think gestured to it a couple times and probably turned into one of those thoughts that I kind of start and then realize like, oh, I'm in danger of starting to ramble. I'm going to get myself back on track and then don't totally complete it. One thing I love about theology and religion and Christianity is the kind of cross-cultural element of it, right? And like the folkloric element, right? Especially when we're talking about we have the luxury of having these stories written down, and that was not always the case. It's all based out of oral tradition. And so across cultures and everything, you'll see tropes come along, and a lot of the time, if that starts to enter the conversation, some people can get really nervous of like, oh, he's kind of talking about like, oh, as if this is mythology, and that means ultimately that it's fiction and it's made up. And is he saying that about my God? And it's like, no, like, hold on, let's like get our genres straight. We're
slow your roll, sir.
Yeah, right. Like it sounds almost like you're in a hurry to misunderstand and become angry, and some people might be that way.
We've all encountered that person that's just waiting for somebody to say or respond in a certain way just so they want to start a fight. So they're waiting on it.
For sure. So
that's not what this is.
The idea though of like the trickster god or the god of mischief, I think I name dropped Loki as maybe the most familiar. Not that, there are plenty of things that set Jesus and Loki apart, right?
God of mischief.
Across cultures, right? Kokopelli, the flute player, is...
Man, Kokopelli's flute. I haven't heard that reference in a while.
Yeah, Kokopelli was like big for like wind chimes growing up for me. I don't know. My mom got really into Kokopelli for a little bit.
I had one of his flutes and a T-shirt with Kokopelli on there and like some artist rendering of it. I remember loving that art because his hair was always like the dreads, but they were like always going out.
Yeah, kind of like in motion almost, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like the trickster god or the trickster deity or even like demigod, right? It brings so much to the table and oftentimes, can be taken more malevolently, but I really appreciate the idea of like trickster doesn't necessarily mean, the markers of that are not malevolent. They are clever. They are a twist, right? And so Jesus having pulled off a great twist, the prestige, if you will, of defeating death, right? Of coming back from the dead. Again, it just seems like what more is he to do? And especially given a lot of what I've read in preparation kind of describes, it's interesting, chapter 20 and 21, it's not quite like a Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 situation.
Right.
But 20, like he makes these appearances and even the end of chapter 20 sounds like it's the end of the story. And then you turn the page and it's chapter 21.
Just kidding.
Yeah. And then John kind of ends, chapter 21 in the same way that he ended chapter 20 of like, and then Jesus did a lot of other stuff too. And can't write it all down or else it wouldn't be contained in all the libraries in all the world, which maybe is a reasonable claim for someone whose scope of the world is just the ancient Near East. But because there's a lot of room for books, but regardless, and just seeing again the bits that Jesus.
So why do you think he would pull these pranks or whatever, where he is like, "Hey, you clowns, throw the net on the other side. You probably know what you're doing, but humor me."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Who's this guy?"
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, "Oh, it's Jesus."
Right. Yeah. I love just that he is not leading with So let me back up. In John also, he has a lot of like I am statements, right? This is where we get the I am the gate and the vine, all this. And so it's Jesus trying to confirm and affirm his identity. And so I think his resurrection now is fully sufficient. And so I just find that interesting for the fact that each of these stories begins with them not recognizing. So kind of the identity of Jesus is not what's really on the table anymore. Nor is it Jesus saying, all right, it's round 2 of my ministry, right? He's not going out, or at least the details are not about going out and healing and casting out demons and teaching, and certainly not returning to Jerusalem and challenging the religious authorities again.
Yeah, that would be odd choice to, hey, I know we just did this, but let's do it again.
Right, yeah. But I mean, empowerment of the disciples. I think there could be a reading of it that sees it as him like testing, right? Like, I think that would be a very maybe cynical take of like, oh, he never reveals himself because he wants to test their faith and see if they can figure it out that it's him.
I don't know. I don't necessarily get that notion that he's putting them to the test. I think that he is meeting them kind of where they are in that moment and doing something that will ultimately catch them off guard and then make them kind of go, oh my gosh, what did we just experience?
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, the guys on the walk to Emmaus, like walked and talked with him for what, like several miles? And then afterward, they were like, who was that guy?
Yeah. Saying a lot of familiar stuff. Like, yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, I see it all through the lens of like empowerment, right? Like if this is kind of the epilogue of the story, kind of the falling action on the plot diagram. It's the handoff into, I mean, literally in the canon order, right? We're going to go right into Acts of the Apostles.
Acts of the Apostles doing all the things.
Kind of handing off the football of the gospel, of the good news to the disciples.
Wait, I don't think they get the touchdown.
Well, some of them do. I think I want to make it like a Steven joke of like, give me the rock. And ooh, boy, do they. But
oh, boy.
Man. Yeah.
So another thing you mentioned that I really thought was interesting that I kind of started thinking about in my life, if this has played any role, and that is unsolicited advice. And that is one of those things that I think we can all think of a time where some person came up and started giving us advice about something. We're like, I don't know you. I don't really need your words right now. I need you to not be here talking to me. Please leave.
Yeah.
And then I had to think, wait a minute, has some random person given me unsolicited advice that I actually took to heart? And I was like, ooh. And then it's kind of stuck with me. And I was wondering if there was some case that you might have.
That is a good
Because I think of often
question,
things in movies or TV show context where somebody goes out of their way to go to somebody else and say, I'm going to give you some advice right now, and you did not ask for it. But, you shut your mouth and listen while I tell you. And then, of course, it shapes the rest of the episode or whatever. And I think of Ron Swanson doing that multiple times. I think of characters who just kind of have this, like, fatherly or parental wisdom about them, and they bring it to somebody, and then it helps shape their perspective.
Yeah, I think in the moment, yes. And now, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I don't like that advice at all. I think it was bad advice of junior and senior year of high school. I had a pretty consistent babysitting gig with a family at the church that I grew up at. They had 4 boys who ranged from age 2 to like 12 or so. And so one night the parents had gotten home and dad was driving me home, and I was dating my then girlfriend, now wife, Mackenzie. And so he just, it started with like, hey, you're dating that girl in the youth group, right? I was like, yeah. And then he's like, how's that going? I'm like, oh, it's great. Yeah, like we love each other, and we were talking about college and stuff. And then it just kind of turns into this long list of like, so here's what happens with me and my wife every day. And like, it was all like positive stuff. To his credit, it wasn't the Gen X / boomer, like, oh, the ball and chain, man, like, enjoy your freedom while you have it. Because I have found church also to be a place that's like, what do we mean here? What are we really doing? Are we going to encourage the joy of marriage, or are we saying enjoy your? Is it like Billy Madison, like don't ever say that, stay where you are? But no, it was good. It was all like very positive, and just looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, this is coming from like a very particular traditional gender role perspective too.
Yeah.
He was, talking about like how to care for your bride, and like kind of these like buzzwords that were very like, mid 2010 evangelical, marriage conference words.
Yeah.
But in the moment though, I'm like, great. Like I'm thinking long term with my girlfriend. I'm like, yeah, I would love to marry this woman, and this guy seems to have a happy marriage. He's speaking nothing but positively. I'm involved with their family in a few capacities. And so I had not asked, hey, tell me what's the secret to a happy marriage.
Yeah.
He was just
he just starts offering
let me tell you a thing or two, kid. So,
well, I mean, I think that at that point that's a connective thing. You already have a relationship with this person.
Yeah.
However, whether or not this is the person you're going to call if you're in a bind, or this is just, yeah, we get along fine, I trust you. But having that moment where I'm going to give you advice, whether you ask for it or not, because I think that this will benefit you, and coming from a great place, and it being genuinely good advice.
Yeah,
Because
for
I
sure.
think I personally would often associate the person who gives unsolicited advice to probably be the last person who should give anyone advice about anything.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's why that's really the only instance I can really think of, is because, I have not found, or that I can remember, right? Because I think, we might be so prone to be like, well, that was weird, and I'm just going to move right along. No one's ever cornered me. I'm sure people have said, been like, hey, you should do this, or hey, I don't know, hey, watch it, like, does that count as unsolicited advice from a stranger? Like, watch where you're going. I mean, it's constructive criticism in some ways, but and I don't know, that's interesting though, right? Like that, I mean, you said you were thinking about this. Have you received unsolicited advice from a stranger that you're like,
I've heard so much advice from random people throughout my life, and
or even like input or feedback too. Right? I think I get that more.
The times where it was unsolicited, but I remembered it, were times where it was almost always somebody who is around my parents' age, and they come up to me, and in almost every case, it was in a church setting.
Yeah.
And in all the other times where I got terrible advice was from some random person at a show where I'm playing music, and they come up and they tell me how I could play a song better. Or
nice, yeah.
I even had somebody who's like, I think you should change the key on this song.
Yeah.
I do it in this key. And I'm like, who are you?
Right.
Why are you talking to me right now?
Yeah.
Like they have nothing to like, oh, I really like your set, or hey, great choice. It's just like, I think you should change the key of the song, and I think you should do it like this. I'm like, why are you talking to me?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm like, this is.
I wonder, like in that sense, do you just like introduce yourself? Like, do they say like, hey, like you should do this, and you say, hey man, I'm John. Like that's usually how conversations start. In case you weren't sure.
So it is hard, because I would say arguably for any good unsolicited advice that made a positive impact, there's probably 30 times where you've gotten unsolicited advice that you're like, why is this happening to me right now? Please go away.
Yeah, totally. I think it's interesting too, right? Because you get even just like the role of social media in that too. Like I think the idea of advice has changed format so much. Like I think about the one, how easy it is to come off or at least present yourself as like an expert or with some measure of expertise.
The things that we learn online from complete strangers that we will never meet, but they teach us something that I'm like, this comes in handy a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, and always the best ones are, I mean, anytime I'm doing something minor, which is about the scope of what I can do on my car myself, right? I pull up a YouTube video, and always like the one that is, the algorithm feeds you is like the most poorly produced, like some dude's dad, like filming on a potato.
Yep.
Just no frills, no presentation power. But he's like, here's how you're going to change this headlight, man. Like, you're just going to do this.
And then it's perfect.
And it's amazing. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, yeah. So maybe there's, if we were to graph the, the quality of the
there's a Venn
advice.
diagram somewhere that would give you that cross point of bad production quality and quality of content, they meet right here.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So, yeah, in the way that one frames it or presents it. So, in that way, to bring it back to the text, right? Maybe Jesus as a hapless stranger, he's not leveraging his Jesus authority here, right? He's
So his Jesus authority in like talking about that, and then you made some mention, or maybe I'm making this up, of the throw the nets on the other side. I will make you fishers of men. All these things, and then they're pulling up the nets, and the nets are breaking because of how many. And there's this metaphor that you brought up about how if you do it the way that Jesus taught or whatever, that you will bring in so many new disciples that it'll be hard to handle at times or whatever, which is kind of what you want. But
sure.
That begged the question for me, how many of Jesus's advice or his miracles were a metaphor for something else? Or how many of them have we turned into a metaphor?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always a matter of convenience, right? Because whenever Jesus says, sell your possessions, it's really hard to be rich and go to heaven. We're like, oh, it's a metaphor.
Well, I don't know if I'd call that a miracle.
It's got to be a metaphor. Well,
I'm thinking turning water into wine. I'm thinking calming the storm. I'm thinking, the bread and fish and feeding the 5,000, like these kinds of miracles. I'm healing people, whatever. And so, what of these do all of these miracles hold secondary meaning?
Right. Or kind of like symbolizing. Yeah. Symbolism. Yeah. Yeah. I think certainly possible, right? I mean, I think the images are intentional, right? When you have wine, I mean, because whenever you think about the miracles, you often have to, or I don't know, I feel like preachers often are like, let me tell you some of the context around this, right? The role that wine played in weddings and like how wedding ceremonies went. And same with, the fish and loaves that's a standard lunch, right? That is not anything special. That's your ham and cheese of the day. No, not ham, because
ham is delicious. Okay, so do you think that the symbolism with these things is something that we have added in the latter, now that we've had our hands on this text for a long time, have we added this symbolism? Is this something that we created, or was it always meant to be there?
Yeah, I would be perfectly comfortable personally saying that we've added it and that does not preclude it from being truth. I don't know if I said
it doesn't diminish the fact that, this feels really nice when it's like, and then subconsciously he was also telling us we're going to have so many people coming to know Jesus' teaching. It's going to be just like all these fish.
Right, yeah. And I think, I think for some people that would be, I don't think Jesus, exactly, was thinking about that. Like, I'm going to do it this way, and they're going to write it this way. And in thousands of years, and some people would say, what do you mean that's not what Jesus was thinking? Because Jesus is omniscient, and that's how everything is. I'm like, okay, I think we read the Bible differently. Again, kind of simmer down.
You need to calm down.
Right.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Do you think like that?
Yeah, because I think taking 1,000-foot view, that is, again, the luxury that we have of being able to look at the narrative arc of John's gospel in particular, Mark's gospel in particular. What are the cross paths? Because it's interesting, several of those signs or miracles are some of those crossovers, right? Where you have the feedings of the multitudes, some of the teachings, right, too. But so I would say we see that how they can be metaphorical lenses for other aspects of the faith that then grows out of the church, right?
Do you find that there's added value when you feel like there is a tandem metaphor that comes along with it? Whenever it's like, if you talk about this miracle, you're also talking about this message.
Sure. Yeah. I think, tandem's interesting, right? Because I don't think it always has to be both and, because I think sometimes a metaphor you can take it as, right? So for instance, if I did say it, I don't think I meant to, because that certainly wasn't meant to be the thrust of like disciple recruitment, right? Like it's not. I don't think this is. I know that's how.
Well, that was what he said. Is like, go make disciples of all nations. That was his the part of the Great Commission and giving us our task as us who call ourselves disciples of Christ go
Right.
make more disciples.
Well, yeah, whenever those disciples, are recruited, and he's like, you want to learn how to become fishers of men? And they're like, ooh, interesting. What a hook, right? No pun intended. Of course, would it have been a pun? Because they use nets instead of hooks. Anyway.
I'm sure somebody had a fishing pole back then.
Probably. The rogue fishermen breaking their rules. But yeah, I do think sometimes those metaphors that are convenient, right? Because I do think, like, so for instance, using this one as a case study, whenever maybe the message or the hoped for goal for your congregation, right? You're like, I want to have this as something emboldening people to go out and like make disciples and like bring their friends, share their testimony, whatever. Like if that's the aim, okay, great. Like that is a metaphorical lens. I think too, though, thinking, saying that is like the interpretation or like, so that miracle comes to mean that versus zooming back out and saying, oh, okay, well, what abundance did that actually embody for them at that time and place too, right? And given for them, that does gel, right? Because they're about to build the church. Was it abundance of
hope? Was it abundance of knowledge? Was it abundance of
humility? Was like a big part of it too, right?
You could really. Some of these feel like they could go in a dozen different directions, and any of them feel just as likely that this totally checks out.
Yeah, and so because I think whenever we do, make those connections or whatever, we end up narrowing the scope a little bit, right? To where a story like this of casting on the other side becomes so, missiologically minded of like, oh, you're looking in the wrong place to like tell people about Jesus. You got to go somewhere else and all this.
Man, we could go nuts with this.
Sure, exactly, right? But then, and just being cognizant of, okay, well, that story does not just become, as soon as you find yourself just like, telling someone else like, oh, but that story is about like mission and like going and recruiting people and like bringing them into the church. It's like, well, that's not all the story is about. That's just maybe the most popular metaphorical lens, right?
Sure.
So, yeah.
And so one of the last things you said or talked about yesterday was going from scarcity to abundance.
Yeah.
And so you tied it a little bit with Jesus saying, throw the nets on the other side.
Yeah.
And so where do you see that kind of coming to fruition in the grand scope of what's going on right here, right now?
Yeah. Scarcity, like my first thought whenever we think about scarcity is, hoarding and just being really, I don't know, like withholding, whether that's resources, energy, or ultimately like imagination, right? Because a lot of it, the throwing it on the other side or on the right side, kind of talked about, that wasn't done, right? That was the steering side. They would either have to move everything, like all the steering implements, to the other side or risk tearing the net. So when I think about scarcity versus abundance, whenever I think about scarcity, I think especially for Jesus followers is oftentimes like a scarcity of imagination, right? We find ourselves bound by what we think is possible or what or who we think is worth the energy and resources, right? I think a lot about, it's funny, I was even talking that what inspired our youth group theme for the summer of fresh and like kind of the citrus imagery.
Still my favorite thing.
I'm excited.
I love this branding.
I love a good summer theme. So we're off with a good one. But it was with a conversation with one of my kids, Bevins.
Shout out Ben Evans.
Love Ben Evans. But he and I were talking about, like school schedule stuff or whatever. And I think it might have been talking about band, but the idea of like how much time is demanded of students who are in band, and you have to be getting a proportional reward, like personally, to make, as he said, the juice worth the squeeze. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that's one measure, and that's not to say it's inherently wrong, because ultimately that's just like a judgment. That's an assessment. That's something we need to analyze, and I think there's wisdom in that, but it is also playing within the bounds of scarcity, right?
Yeah.
Of like, is what we are hoping to see come out of this, is the mission, the hope, the dream, is that going to be worth the sacrifices, worth the demands?
There is a movie that uses the phrase, is the juice worth the squeeze, multiple times throughout the movie. I'm going to have to figure out which one it is.
Yeah.
See if it is appropriate enough to
Yeah.
apply to your summer theme.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, and that's the thing too, right? Is the juice worth the squeeze, or anything about juice and squeezing? We've kind of talked about. That's going to be hard to put on a T-shirt that students are going to want to wear to school, right? But still, that idea of, I think then the flipping to an abundance mindset or framework is, yes, there is still wisdom in assessing things, because if you just decide every drop of juice is always worth the squeeze no matter what, that's how you're going to burn yourself out. That's how you're going to lose passion. You're going to kind of lose the plot, right? Miss the forest for the trees. But also, I think the abundance of grace and a mindset of abundance is also an encouragement of like, people are worth exhausting your resources. There are moments and people and times that are worth bending over backward and giving a disproportionate amount of effort for maybe not a lot of immediate reward or yield. And
Well, it's also so different than it was when we were younger. And I'm even old enough to remember even farther back where like it just there wasn't really that much of a pressure to do like 80 different things every week.
oh yeah,
And you had 2 or 3 maybe
yeah,
on average. And now it's just you're encouraged to do everything.
yes,
And so
yeah.
it just does beg the question, how do you decide this is worth doing, this is not, and because like so many other factors go into that, like which of my friends are going to be also doing this other thing, and do I want to be a part of that because of that, or do I want to be a part of that because it's actually what I want to do? And
Yeah.
a lot to consider.
Yeah, definitely. Right. I mean, I think about our mission team here and like kind of deciding what partners, what to pursue and how we can be of most use, right? Do the next right thing, the next best thing, right?
Do the right thing.
Yeah. So
Right is subjective though, in many cases.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, and again, that's where the humility and wisdom comes in to say, can we, is this the
Develop
right time,
the wisdom so
right
you will
move?
know when the right thing is the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually might be a good quote. I'll have to see if that's been said before. I'm sure it has.
Yeah. And then follow Peter's move of put on some clothes, dang it.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Just that reference to the fact that, and then he had to throw on some clothes because he was naked.
Again, John is so petty to me, and I think it is so funny.
This is the same person that was like, they both ran, and the other disciple was faster than Peter. You mean you?
Yeah.
The person writing this?
refers
you?
to himself almost exclusively as the disciple Jesus loved, like Jesus' favorite. Like, come on.
I have to believe that there was some humor in this where he's just like, while he's writing it down,
Right.
he's laughing.
Yes.
There's no way. Also, Peter was naked. Ooh.
Got him. Yeah, it's
Nailed it.
Yeah, I want to hear Peter's. There's got to be a good book out there of like the historical fictional version of Peter and John, especially after Jesus ascends. So there's no more like referee, no more mediator between Peter and John, and their antics of.
They both had to be such morons though when they first
so good.
started.
Oh yeah.
They're basically kids when Jesus picks them up off the street, just like, hey, you guys are doing this thing. You want to just do different stuff over here? And they're like, okay.
Yeah, well, and I'd have to go back and double check. I don't know that John's gospel includes
Like how Jesus picked him up?
that and also the account of James and John asking to be at the right and left hand of Jesus. Oh, what a convenient exclusion there, Jonathan.
Oh, man, the things that it's like these are the most important writings ever. Also, they're petty sometimes.
Oh yeah, I mean they're written by people, and that doesn't make them any less inspired, any less sufficient for knowing God and grace and all this, right? But at the same time, I don't know, it adds some flavor to it, some spice even. So
Just think what it would have been like if social media existed back then and it was all coming together, and just how ridiculous it would have been.
the
Be
comments,
like, hey, you want to race? You want to race right now? I bet I'm faster than you. Come on, man.
the Galilee ice bucket race
bucket
challenge, yeah, be good.
I'm gonna challenge Jesus and and James and Peter. Ugh.
Yeah. Man, so, and I don't know, I like to think they made Jesus laugh. One of my youth ministers was big on talking about how Jesus was the life of the party, which I do think is true. I do think he also really tried to highlight that image because he was there for about a year and a half and was highly just invested in our senior class that were big partiers, and I think took it upon himself to try and save their souls in that way. And so he was like, you know what will appeal to it's a classic youth minister move. Like, you know who else loved a good party? Jesus of Nazareth. So, but I mean, you had a point too, right? I mean, you look at who Jesus hangs out with, etc. And so I like to think that Jesus is also letting John and Peter rib each other and probably wrestle each other on the beach.
He probably found
and is
it
just laughing.
hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, gosh, these kids are dumb.
Yeah.
But this is really funny.
Yeah. So, and that, I mean, we didn't even talk about too, right? He's getting ready. He's handing the football off. The story is theirs. And also he had already spoken to them about the Paraclete, the Advocate, the Holy Spirit who will guide. And so, yeah, again, just the levity of being like, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Maybe evidence to the contrary or appearances to the contrary. We're really going to be okay. And here we are today talking about it.
Deeply flawed, but all things considered, we might just make it through in spite of all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Yeah.